Okay, so what else can we do with the curve? Well, actually, quite a bit. Let's start a new scene here. So I'll go Control N to reload my startup file. I've got a new scene here. Where should we take this? Well, let's add a cube. And what we'll do, we'll make this cube into a wall. So I'm going to rescale it along the x-axis. So SX, and I'm just doing this by eye. Somewhere about there. We want it longer on the Y, so SY. I'm not making any kind of measurements here. I'm just kind of doing this by eye just to demonstrate the principle of this. Okay, so we've got a wall here. We can imagine it with a brick texture. I'm not going to bother putting a brick texture on. And let's add a curve. So Shift A, let's add a Bezier curve. Okay, it's already orientated to the Z-axis by default. So I'm just going to spin it on the Z-axis, so or rotate it rather. Spin is another function in Blender, and we'll come to that. It has to do with curves, but we'll come to that after. So let's rotate it RZ 90. Okay, so we've got this curve here. Let's scale this curve up a bit so it kind of matches the wall a bit. And let's edit this curve. Let's make a bit more of a shape out of it. Let's rotate this a little. Grab this. I'm going to do Shift Z so it moves along the grid, and in the XY direction, not in the up-down direction. But you can see this is in an up-down direction. I want this flat, so I'm just going to grab this and bring it back flat. Don't know if this will work or not. Let's try this. Let's box select these, B key, select everything, and let's size the Z-axis to 0, so it's all the same. SZ 0. Yes, it did work. Okay, so this curve is perfectly flat along the Z-axis or the Z-axis. We've got a shape to it. Let's go back to object mode. Now we can use this curve to influence the shape of this wall. So how do we do that? Let's select the wall and let's go to our modifiers panel. We'll add a modifier and we'll select the curve modifier. Okay, so now we have a modifier, and we need to select the curve that this modifier is going to use. So we've only one curve in the scene, which is this Bezier curve. And watch what happens as I drag this along the y-axis. Okay, you can see this is moving all over the place, but it is still staying flat along this plane here. Okay, and the reason for that is because there's not much geometry in this. There's not enough geometry or vertices to bend around the curve. So let's add some. So we go to edit mode, add it, snaps back to its original position, and we'll add edge loops with it with the Control R. So I'm holding my cursor close to one of these edges that are going along this direction. Control R, press something wrong there. Let's edit this again. There we go. Control R, I pressed the wrong key. I'm going to use my scroll wheel to add a few more edge loops, somewhere around there I suppose. Drop them. Okay, so now let me go back into object mode. A bit of a thing here, but we'll talk about that in a minute. As I drag this along, you will see that the wall is following the shape of the curve. We do have a deformation axis here, so instead of along the axis, it's taken the profile of this here. If we took it as a profile of the Y, it's behaving differently, and same with the Z. Okay, generally you just want the X here. Right, so let me go back into edit mode here. And what was going wrong in the middle? Well, I don't rightly know, so I'm going to investigate this. Edit mode, let me reduce the resolution of this Seems to have some kind of kink going on here in the middle, and I'm not sure why. Okay, might possibly have something to do with the origin, so let's do something about that. This is not a situation you normally encounter. I don't know why it's gone wrong with here, but anyway, got my curve selected, and I want to change the position of the origin. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select this control point here, and I think Shift S will send my cursor to selected. Okay, so my 3D cursor moves from over here to exactly this origin point. Now if I go into object mode, I think Shift S again, no, can't remember. So let's transform origin to 3D cursor. Actually, it hasn't given a shortcut. I thought there was one. I had the wrong thing selected here. My 3D cursor's over there. Why? Because I pressed Shift S earlier. Okay, rewind a little. Curve selected. Let's edit the curve. This vertex selected. Shift S. Move the cursor to selected, which moves my cursor over here. Tab. Object mode. Now with this I can move the origin back to the 3D cursor. Object transform, origin to 3D cursor. There we go. It's affected this wall because the modifier was applied. So let's select the wall, let's delete that modifier, and the wall should snap back to its original position and size. Okay, now if I add the modifier, which was the curve modifier, and I select the Bezier curve, it's still going slightly wrong, and I've just remembered the reason why. I'm sorry, I haven't been well, I'm a bit rusty with stuff. So let's delete this modifier. Right, the problem with it is the origins are in kind of different places. The origin of this is in the middle of the wall, where the origin of this is on the edge. We want the origin of the wall to be kind of along the edge, so let's work on that. Let's go into edit mode on the wall. Let's select these 4 vertices here, and again we can come down to the transform menu. Transform, I'm losing it, it's not there. So you'll have to do what I normally have to do when I forget something, is kind of go through. I wanted the 3D cursor. There it is, a snap menu, that's why. I want the cursor to selected. Okay, now I can go back into object mode, and I can use a transform, which will be the origin to 3D cursor. There is also an option in the tool shelf usually, set origin to 3D cursor, which is the one I normally use. Okay, now if I add this modifier and I select the Bezier curve, it's still going wrong. Okay, so let's go back to object mode. Let's delete that modifier. Let's go into a top view for a minute, and let's grab and move this so the origins are in the same region. And let's try this curve, Bezier curve. There we go. So yes, the origins need to be kind of in line to work. I do apologise for the confusion, I've gotten a bit rusty on this. But as we drag this wall along, you see how it takes the shape of the curve. So even if I leave it at that, I then select the curve and I edit it, I can then adjust my curve and the wall should follow. It's bending too far back on itself there, but you'll see there it's taking the shape. Okay, so that is one way we can use this as a modifier. So let me just start a new scene again. Another way, let's make I don't know, something like a Stonehenge thing. We're all familiar with Stonehenge, aren't we? Let me just see if I can find an image. You can't see what I'm doing because I'm in two monitors here, but something like that. Come on, load. There we go. Stonehenge is an ancient ruin in the south of England. I think it dates back about 5,000 years or so. Apparently some kind of druid temple. But we're not going to recreate this exactly. We're just going to do a kind of a very basic simulation of it. So what do I need to do? First of all, I'll need to kind of get the shape of stone I want. So let me scale this, and not on Z, so it only comes in on 2 axes. Get this kind of pillar shape. Let me move it up a bit. Okay. Right, so I'm going to go into a front view. I'll grab it. I'm going to move this across. Bring this down. My snap must be on. No, it's not. GZ. There you go. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this across there. I'm going to duplicate this, rotate it around so it sits as the header of the top piece. It's not selecting. I've got something going on down here. I'm not sure what. Anyway, GZ, let's bring that down. Let's SX slightly. Okay, select these 3. Shift D to duplicate them along the x-axis. Let's make this a little smaller. Bring this down. Shift D along the x-axis. Let's make this larger. Bring it up. I'm just going to kind of array these. So select them all. Shift D along the x-axis. And Shift D, do that once more. Along the x-axis. There we go. I'm now going to select all these objects and just join them together so I don't have so many objects to work with. Okay, so we've got these kind of pillars and header arrangements. Let's bring the 3D cursor over here somewhere. Shift A, and let me add a bezier or a circle. Okay, so we're going to use this as a modifier object. Okay, it's very small, so let me scale it up a bit. Okay, so I'm going to select this object here, come back to my modifiers panel, use a curve modifier, and I'm going to select my bezier circle as the object. And you can see how it's starting to bring them around. Now there is some overlap in here because I've got too many objects, so let me scale these objects down a bit. Alternatively, I could select the circle and scale it up a bit. But you see how we can use the curve modifier to influence our geometry. Now this isn't going to be exactly like Stonehenge. If I go into top view, you'll see that the all the edges are pointing towards the center of the circle. This is going to be expected. These are straight, these are tangential to the circle because there's not enough geometry to curve them around, but in this case I didn't want that. But if I was doing this as a project and I want to square these out, this is the way I would do it. I would use the curve modifier. I would then apply that modifier delete my circle, and then come into the actual geometry, and let's go into wireframe here. So I would select these here, rotate them so they're square, and kind of work my way around the project doing it that way. Mode, let's go into solid view again. So you can use a curve modifier to curve existing objects of geometry. Let's just start a new file here again. Let's add a cube. Mesh cube. I'm going to scale this down, and I'm going to move this across. Let's do this in edit mode so it's all one object. I'm going to shift D along the y-axis. Shift D along the y-axis. I'm not using any measurements here, I'm just adding a bunch of extra geometry. Let's do this once or twice more. Okay, so I've got this object, it's all one object. Let me move it across here a little. Put my cursor to the grid, cursor to center, sorry. Shift S to reset my cursor to the middle. I'm going to add, once again I'm going to add a circle. Okay. Probably scale it up a little, move it this way. Excuse me. I'm going to add a curve modifier. So this object comes around the circle. Right. Okay. I can scale this object up. Actually scale it down, and the problem being is that the origin is way down here. Well, now I've got this kind of somewhat central to it. Let me reset the origin. So set origin to the center of geometry. Center of mass to geometry. Anyway, let me select this curve, and now select one of these points. And if I grab this out this way, you can see how your geometry is going to follow the curve. If I grab it out this way, if I was to rotate it, let's grab this. There we go. So you can see how this can affect. So I've got this kind of roughly oval shape. Let me scale it on the x-axis. Same with the y. Okay, and if I was to do it on the z or z axis, it's just going to move it kind of closer and further away. Okay, so you can use curves to place objects, existing objects, rather than using bevels to add geometry to a curve.